You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 508, our continuing saga series of episodes focused around short stories in Star Wars. And this week, we are going to be covering Disturbance by Chen. This appeared in the From a Certain Point of View Empire Strikes Back book that came out just a couple years ago, celebrating the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back. And what a tale it is. It's probably one of the best ones. It was my favorite, and that's why, even though I told Lauren she was allowed to pick the story, there was no question in my mind that we were going to do this. It was really just a facade. She was never really had any kind of say in any of this, really, much like the Emperor does to Vader at times. But Lauren's with us tonight. Hopefully she was on mute, so she didn't hear any of that. But Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I will say, I was being indecisive about the story and you were the tiebreaker. Just for the record, this one was already on my list, so I do have some sense.
Yes, no, it was. It is one of the standout ones, so it's pretty hard not to, it's pretty hard to look past this one and go, it was okay. It just definitely was not okay. But more on that here in a little bit. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this story. I mean, it was a really good read, so I'm looking forward to it.
So why don't we get your business out of the way first? I know we kind of save it to the very end, but you've got a new video out this week. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So yesterday I posted my final, it's a little wrap-up video of the High Republic Phase 2 comic series that I've been covering, written by Cavan Scott. And so what I've been doing is kind of covering the issues in chunks. So my first video was issues 1 through 4. Then I did next chunk, the next chunk. And so the last issue 10, came out a few weeks ago. And so I finally got that covered. And that series, it just ended on a really great note. So I was glad to talk about it because it was one of the highlights of Phase 2 for me.
Yeah, I've heard that pretty much unanimously across the board. And it's probably no surprise either, given that was, of course, Cavan Scott, who definitely has his pulse and many other things well vested in the storyline, the characters, and just kind of overall. So, I mean, I kind of expected that going in. I got a question for you, just kind of off the record here. But how do you, did you notice a difference? And I think Jonesy and I may have covered this a little bit, but did you notice any kind of a difference in terms of how his storytelling goes, or even his writing specifically in comic book form versus novel? And I get there's a stark difference, right? Because you can't do certain things and all that. But did you feel like it was still that same author throughout?
To me, it did feel like the same author, because I feel like one thing that he really excels at is with his characters, he shows you very well what their motives are, what they want to achieve. And even if it's a character that at moments is kind of all over the place, you still know where that character's heart is. And that's one thing I say in my video. And regardless of if it's in the comics or in the novels that he's written, you still get that feeling. So that's one of my favorite things about his writing, just across the board. Yeah,
I would agree, especially his first run there of comics they did in Phase 1. I imagine the same things happened here in Phase 2. So go check that out if you want to see more. All of the Jedi Novel Archive episodes are out at cantinacast.com/YouTube. We should just make one have Jonesy make one that's cantinacast.com/Lauren, and it just kind of redirects to that. That'd be kind of a cool thing to do. Jonesy, get on that, will you?
But cool.
Yeah. Let's see. And also something else that's come up here recently. We talked about it last week, but that is, we've got a new Jeditorial out. That's by Jeff Englehart. The title of that one is Kenobi, A Little Bit of Love. And he's actually with us live in the chat right now. But to see that Jeditorial, it's an editorial, but it's a Jeditorial. cantinacast.com/editorial. A lot of love for Kenobi, celebrating the kind of the 1 year anniversary since that release. So please check that out and show Jeff, give him a thumbs up or a comment there, especially if you like what you have read. Let's see. And a special thanks, of course, to all of our Patreon members who continue to keep the lights on for the show, especially to our now part of the tribe members. So Rob, Mike Borda, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C, Jacob, Steve, and Rita Reborn, and also our Delusions of Grandeur tour, which is Rod, CJ, and Alex. Thank you all so much for being contributors to the show and your patronage. It means a lot to us. It really does. It goes a long way to give you, cool stuff like 1080p video and good quality sound on the mixes and a number of other things like stickers as well. So if you guys want to know more, if you guys want to support the show, you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon and sign up for any one of the tiers that are there. Things, I think we start at like $1 just to kind of help the show, and it goes all the way up from there depending on what your tastes and interests and just how much you want to hear us and see us. And I mean probably Lauren, not me and Jonesy. So you do better stuff than we do, honestly. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's get into our main topic, which is Disturbance. So let's see. How do I start this? I think this answers the question of when does the Emperor become aware of Luke Skywalker and his relationship to Anakin Skywalker? Right. This is for 40 years. The way it's presented in the movie is he simply comes out and he's like, "Hey, I know about Luke Skywalker," and Vader's like, "Yeah, we got to do something about it." And yeah, sounds good. Let's churn him. Yeah, he could be a good ally. And of course, that's not how it went. We'll get to that here a little more specifically. But it was always a question, right? That was like, wow, how did he know? And there was something to be said about the mystique of not knowing all that. But that's the whole point of this series of books, right? From a certain point of view, fills in those gaps, tells those little small stories, little snippets. And sometimes they kind of come off as being, fun little stories, really not significant. This one feels a little bit different only because of how powerful it was and some of the things that we learned, because we actually get inside the head of Palpatine. And there's an aspect of this that I was not expecting in the story, which was his view on not only the Force, but the Jedi's connection to the Force. So it was a lot deeper than just here's the quick, synopsis of what happened and how it came to be. It was a little more in depth than that. But for you, I guess now that you've read the story, how does this change that scene for you? And does it change anything else about the relationship between Anakin, or I should say Vader and Palpatine, or Luke and Vader, or anything else, is for that matter at this point?
Well, I will say that scene, when I just based on the movies, I had always thought that, Palpatine must have gotten like some sort of intelligence, heard that Luke's the one that blew up the Death Star, all of that. But like this version, I really like how it's much more, the Force is much more involved in this version rather than just some military intelligence that Palpatine received. So I really like this perspective a lot more than what I had originally assumed. And I guess it doesn't really, knowing the story, it doesn't change the relationship in any way, but for me at least, but it does reinforce what I kind of already have felt previously about the three of them, which is that there is no part of that dynamic that was not purely the will of the Force, the prophecy of the Chosen One playing out exactly how it's supposed to. So this story, just like seeing the way that Palpatine learned the information, how the Force kind of brought it to him at first, it just really cemented that for me and just drove it home.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree. Like, I don't know that there was anything groundbreaking in terms of the relationship that exists between them. It was more of a reaffirmation that there was never any goodwill intent from Palpatine, right? This has always been his plan. He's basically seizing the moment. He's still taking advantage of Anakin Skywalker. He's going to play into his fears, right? All of this was planned. And it's, again, more reaffirmation that he is kind of playing the long game, because this is a vision that he sees, and he doesn't really execute on this until we get to Return of the Jedi. And yet he allows Vader at this point. This is kind of I don't want to steal too much thunder here, but there's a point in this vision, or just shortly after, where he comes back and says, from this point on, I'm going to give this guy whatever he needs, right? All the resources, as much time as he needs to go after this person, because in his mind, he was doing the will of himself. Like, Vader was doing the will of the Emperor because the Emperor wanted Luke Skywalker. So that's why there was never really kind of like, he's like, hey, you got to be careful with your feelings. But, even that, you think he's probably saying that knowing that he is going to be searching his feelings, and there's no way to keep those in check, right? Still the fool is kind of what he calls him here at the very end because of that. But yeah, I think it just reaffirms just how manipulative Palpatine really is, and to what great lengths he'll go to fulfill a prophecy, right? It was pretty ambiguous, even in this Force vision. it's that confidence that was seeping in that he was going to be able to kind of play this out to his will, however he wanted to. And of course, that was his downfall, but more on that, of course, later. So yeah, for me, I think it does. It changes the context of the scene a little bit more, but it really just reaffirmed the relationships between all of them. So, and again, I've already talked about it, but this is the story. This is the why of, he says that he'll be a great asset. Can it be done? Yes, he'll join us or die my master. Now, the background of our breakdown tonight is, of course, the story that we just talked about, but there was an audio commentary. If you go out to Spotify, there's an audio commentary that was done with Mike Chen and Tom Haller from Del Rey, one of the editors for this book, and was working with Mike Chen on this story. It's from back in 2020. And there is some kind of some neat little tidbits here and there. We'll probably weave those into the discussion of this book as well. But if you get a chance, it's only like 15 minutes long, that whole interview. But definitely worth going back and listening to if you get a chance. So, okay, so let's talk about the first part. So it starts with him feeling this disturbance, right, in the Force. And I thought one of the cool things was this wasn't the first time. Even though it was never mentioned, there was a disturbance in the Force the moment that Luke Skywalker fired those proton torpedoes and blew up the Death Star. And it's at this point that it starts with Palpatine in his meditation chamber. He's on Coruscant, in what was used to be the Jedi Temple at this point. And he's starting to he feels something very similar, very connected here between the disturbance that he felt when the Death Star blew up and the disturbance that he's feeling now. And before he gets even into the vision, right, before he starts kind of meditating and going into the vision, trying to understand what exactly had just transpired, he has this kind of moment where he's talking about the Jedi. And he mentions how the Jedi are foolish. They've wasted their entire lives out there concerned about their, quote, connection to the Force. He's almost kind of being real, casual about it. Almost, he's being very, what would be the word? I want to say just, he's undermining the Jedi, and how they perceive the Force and how they connect to the Force. He calls it a primitive idealism, right? Trying to be all symbiotic and allowing it to flow through you. You can almost hear him like saying it like
that woo-woo stuff.
all that woo-woo stuff. And it's such a stark difference because in his mind, and we see examples of this in the vision itself, Palpatine, much like most of the other, I think how I've always interpreted the dark side users is they're all about controlling the Force. They're all about manipulating the Force and dominating the Force, right? That's where they get their power, where the Jedi allow the Force to empower them. And more on this and a ton of other episodes that we've already talked about. But again, reaffirmation here that this is what he was trying to do. He was saying that the Force wasn't luminous, right? It wasn't elegant. It was basically there to control, and it was basically there to exploit however he wanted to. You were supposed to tame it. You were supposed to conquer it. So anyways, he puts these two disturbances together and then realizes again that they're connected from the same source. But at the same time, as he starts to kind of go into this vision, trying to get a vision that's coming to him, he's almost having to fight it. Like there's something pushing him back, not allowing him to see exactly who's at the root of that disturbance in the Force. And he can feel it. And so he's essentially in this story fighting the Force like tooth and nail, clawing his way into the vision to see exactly what's going on, which is one of the things I really loved about the story and how Mike Chen kind of portrayed not only the Force as this storm, but Palpatine's, resilience and his determination to just control it, dominate it, literally tear it apart so he can see what the vision was and what the Force or whatever was trying to prevent him from seeing, which I thought was really amazing. So I want to get your thoughts just quickly, I guess, on Palpatine and his interpretation of the Force, the Jedi dark side, how they use it, all that sort of thing. And then certainly how much did you enjoy, I guess, what Mike Chen did here with kind of conveying what Palpatine was doing with the Force to get to the vision?
Yeah, I really liked how it was portrayed, how Palpatine only cares about what the Force can give him. He doesn't care about the symbiosis, the woo-woo, all of that type of stuff. It's just purely about, it's exactly what you were saying, just exploiting it for what it can deliver. And I feel like that was described so well, especially the image of when he first starts to get kind of like the beginnings of the vision, and he's like, wait, I need to see more, and he's like forcing himself into it like very aggressively, and it's just a very different, that like juxtaposed with the way that we see the Jedi use the Force, especially with all this High Republic stuff I've been reading lately.
Right.
It's like
Very different.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was really cool how that was described. And it also reminded me too of how in the interview that you were talking about with Mike Chen, when he's talking about how much the Revenge of the Sith novelization influenced his writing in Star Wars and the exploration of the characters and all that, you can totally see that in the way that he describes Palpatine's relationship to the Force. And I mean, also in some other stuff in the story as well, but in that particularly, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. That one of the standout moments from that Spotify interview was the fact that he just was gushing over the Revenge of the Sith novelization. I think we've all talked about it and said that it's probably one of the best. It is the best novelization. It's certainly one of the better, if not one of the best, Star Wars novels out there. It just continues to give to us in a lot of different ways. So very cool that he's got a pulse that comes directly from that as well. Okay, and so from this point, we get into the vision, and it's almost like a two-parter. There's like one part of the vision, it kind of ends, and then he's like, I need to know more. He kind of digs even further. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren. She's going to walk us through the vision, what Palpatine sees, but there's a twist to it, and I'll let you surprise everybody with that twist. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what first happens is he sees himself in his office, and at first it's like and this is another thing that was really cool about the way it was written, is as he's describing what he's seeing, you're kind of like, it almost feels like you're trying to like see through the fog and like kind of make sense of what it is that's going on. And so you're kind of going through that with him in the vision. But so he's sitting in his office, and a young boy comes in, and he notices that this person is very different from Dooku, very different from Maul. He's kind of like his own thing, but he's very powerful, and you can see that from the start of the vision. And they do have a standoff, and the young boy, who, I mean, the way that it's described, you can pretty much tell that this is Luke. This is like Sith Luke is what we're seeing. Overpowers Palpatine. And when it's kind of like the moment, like the make or break moment, there's a voice that says, do it, which of course call back to Revenge of the Sith when Palpatine's telling Anakin to kill Dooku. And Luke kills Palpatine. So Palpatine watches himself die, which it's interesting in this scene too, because he doesn't have much of an emotional response to seeing himself get killed. He writes it off as more of like, well, this is part of the rule of two. And he also seems to feel like there's a way that he can overcome this. Like he still is able to strategize his way out of this, he assumes.
Yeah.
But then like once we get to the end of this like first part of the vision, he realizes that the voice that said do it was Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah. And that's the part that was, so a couple things on that. Like, not only, so I want to quickly just kind of touch on the fight, because it was pretty interesting the way this came about. So Luke walks in, and immediately, and he's got his lightsaber ignited, or actually no, he doesn't have his lightsaber ignited, but Palpatine gets up and starts to try to use the Force lighting on him, and then Luke Force chokes him, and he chokes him so hard that he has to stop using the Force lighting, and at this point he like calls his lightsaber up and tries to ignite it and send it out. He sends it over to him, tries to call it to himself, and Luke stops the lightsaber in midair, right? And Mike Chen was talking about this I think it was in that Spotify interview again, where he was talking about how he was trying to show just how powerful Luke had become, that he was more powerful than Vader. He was definitely more powerful than Palpatine if he had been a Sith Lord, and we can argue whether or not he was that powerful at the end of Return of the Jedi or even beyond that. But really tapping into the dark side is what kind of enabled him to be as powerful as he was. But he stops the lightsaber in midair that Palpatine's trying to, it's his own lightsaber that he's trying to summon to himself. Then he ignites the lightsaber through the Force and impales Palpatine. And the other part here was, like you said, he was more looking at this like he was almost enjoying it, like, right? He was almost looking at this as opportunistic in some way, that the Force was showing him this because there was a reason. It wasn't because of his own death. I mean, how could that even happen, right? There had to be something more. There had to be a reason why he was being shown this vision, and so he was never fearful by that. And again, like you said, it was just more about it's just the the rule of two. I like the do it, right? The callback to that. That was pretty sweet that it had happened here. And then the last thing I think that Anakin says is, "You have done well." And it's at that moment that he recognizes that is the voice of Anakin Skywalker. Again, not enough for Palpatine. He could have just simply walked away from this, but he has to know more, right? He starts digging into this even more. So I'll let you kind of pick up at that point.
Yeah, so that's when, once he realizes it's Anakin, that's when he's like, I've got to know more. And this is like the part we were talking about earlier, where he's forcing his way into the vision now. Even though it almost sounds like there was some sort of a resistance to him being able to see more. And I theorize that there's a reason for that, which I'll get to here in a second. But he forces himself into the rest of the vision, and he's watching the rest of this type of like a story play out. And what he sees is it's Anakin telling Luke that, well, I guess it's Vader in Anakin's body at this point, because in the vision, he's not in the Vader suit. He looks like Anakin.
Yeah.
He's telling him, you've done well. And then you see that he's also joined by Padme, and they're all three together. And there's this massive Starfleet in the distance. Like, I think at one point it's described that it's like obscuring the sky. That's how thick this Starfleet is. And this is when Palpatine realizes, when all of these different elements are coming together, he's like, oh, this isn't a Force vision. This is somebody else's delusion I'm seeing. And obviously, based on all these things coming together, it has to be Vader's. And I thought it was really cool how this scene was written, because you're seeing like the wants of Anakin and the wants of Vader coming together in the same image. And you see like Anakin's desire for family, but also this desire for glory, which Anakin at one point believed was going to fix everything that he had lost, the family that he had lost. Yep. So it's like, yeah, like the glory is like tainting the family part, and it's all mixed together and it's all messed up and bad. But this is when
perverse
Palpatine
in a way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, perverse is what I would say.
Like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's when he's like, I could use this against him. This will be very easy to use against him because of the perverse aspect of it, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be clear, that fleet that was on Coruscant that suddenly was there was a fleet of Star Destroyers. Like you said, it was almost like a blanket over Coruscant. There was that many of them, kind of showing you the power that Luke was able to achieve, and actually how the power that Luke, along with Vader, Anakin Skywalker, was able to achieve, right? It wasn't just Luke. That was really interesting. All of the Star Destroyers, they take off at the very end, and we're kind of just left with Luke and Anakin there, and I'll kind of turn it back over to you for that last piece of it. But I want to just quickly read that section that you were talking about, where he realizes that it wasn't actually a vision, that the second part. I feel like the first part was a vision. Yeah, and this one probably definitely was, but it was almost, again, it was a vision, but it was the vision or the delusion, as Palpatine says, of Anakin Skywalker, right? It says, and with that image came a realization. This was not a vision. This was a delusion, a hope or wish of a desperate dream. It was everything Vader wanted, or maybe it was everything taken from him. Palpatine had always ensured that those were one and the same. Like, that was so dark that to read that Palpatine knew that anything Anakin ever wanted or Vader ever wanted, he always took away from him, just keeping him in the dark, but no pun intended, making him continuously suffer. And through that suffering, he knew that he had a very powerful ally, or a powerful tool, as really the case was. So I enjoyed all of that. I think there was a line in there too when Padme came out, where Luke says father, and then he looks over at Padme and says mother, again playing into what Anakin would have always wanted, right? His children. And of course, it goes without saying, Leia's not any part of this, because he still doesn't know about Leia. So in his perfect world, right, it's just the three of them. And of course, Leia's out there somewhere to be found. And that's when Palpatine kind of connects it all, right? He realizes that this was Anakin basically protecting Luke, like that, the piece that was, well, here was my theory. You said you had a theory. I guess I just took it at face value that somehow, in some way, probably just through sheer will of the Force coming from Vader, he was trying to ensure that Palpatine would never find out about this. And so when Palpatine was like clawing his way, trying to push through that, to me, that was some kind of I don't even know if it was conscious. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But it felt like that was something that Vader had done to ensure that Palpatine would never see this vision, and underestimated just how powerful Palpatine actually is. So, but what were your thoughts? I guess what was your theory on that?
Yeah, mine was similar. I felt like, because kind of like at first, exactly what you were saying, the first part was a vision, or at least parts of it were a vision. And then the second part was, this is somebody's private thoughts. And I'm sure
Exactly.
that Anakin would have been afraid of Palpatine finding them. I'm sure that it's not the first time that Palpatine has gone rummaging around in his mind. So I could see like him trying to block him in that way, and that being why it's harder for him to access all these details.
Yep. Yeah, that's similar takeaway that I had. Do you have the lines in there where he talks what Luke and Vader say at the very end before that Force vision kind of ends and Palpatine ends the call?
Well, I know that there's the part where they're talking about the fleet, and Luke is saying that it's their fleet. Is that the part that you're referencing?
Yeah. So yes, and right before that, Anakin says, "Luke, you have done well. Behold, my son, the most powerful fleet in the galaxy." And that's when they dismiss the fleet. It takes off into hyperspace. The entire fleet leaves into hyperspace at that point. Never really explains where they go, right? It's not important. But then he does end with, "Yes, Father, our fleet." And that's when Palpatine's like, "All right, that's enough. I'm like, doing something about this. This has gone too far at this point."
I wonder if that kind of I wonder if that kind of struck a nerve, because Vader seems to think that he can do a better job of running the Empire than Palpatine does. Because when we're seeing Vader's version of it, it sounds much more grand and glorious than what we had in the present. So I almost wonder if that little extra thing of Vader thinking he could do it better and have this bigger, better fleet, I wonder if that kind of made him mad.
Maybe. Jonesy says, and I believe in the comics, Vader went out of his way to obscure this from the Emperor. So that aligns nicely with what we're seeing here. And he's speculating they went to find Thrawn. Stop it. They did not go out to find them. Maybe they did. Who knows? But yeah, to your point, what you were saying earlier, I guess just now, was when he's out there and Luke's hanging from the ledge and he's like, together we can rule the galaxy as father and son. I mean, this is all, I'm sure this vision wasn't, or in my head, this vision had been played out in Anakin / Vader's mind many, many times in different forms, different variations of that power. So when he's out there on that ledge, I think he fully believes that some of this can happen. This will happen. Maybe not, of course, to these exact ways, because Padme's not there and he still looks like Vader, and he's never going to look like Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, which is how he looks in both of these visions, right? But I think he's seen enough of these to realize that, yeah, Luke will become very powerful if I bring him over, and not for the Emperor, but for our own sake. And together we can build, this monumental fleet and rule the galaxy together. So he's got pure conviction in his voice in that scene in Empire Strikes Back because of these visions and because of what he's seen already in the past.
He also seems unable to understand how somebody could not want that. Like, okay, we've got each other, we've got family, and we've got glory. How could there be anything else better than that? He seems to not be in touch with the other option, which is to turn away from that.
Yeah. And so at this point, this is how Vader, so I guess Palpatine then, he realizes that this whole obsession up until this point, he's kind of chalked up Vader's determination and willingness to go seek out the rebel leadership as simply just doing the Emperor's will. And now he's got a very different take on this. It's not because he's doing goodwill. It's because he's looking for his son, right? There's nothing in here about, doing what's right for the Emperor or doing what's right for the Empire. This is really all about looking for his son, Luke Skywalker. And then he ties it back to Hoth, and he's like, holy crap. No wonder he was so obsessed about finding Luke during that entire time and chasing every single lead and launching thousands of probe droids throughout the galaxy looking for him. I mean, he's obsessed. I think even in the crawl, right? It even says Vader's obsessed with finding Luke Skywalker. It's because of this vision, right? He knows that it's his son at this point. And maybe that was always implied. But again, just there's no doubt after this story here. But then he also goes on, Palpatine at this point goes on to talk about Vader, saying that Vader's lack of control over his feelings caused them to be his very undoing again. So taking and saying that, it's his past, it's the way he wraps himself around feelings, it's eventually going to kill him. And ironically, it's the one thing that ends up killing Palpatine, of course. And then this is the other one. I just want to read this one real quick. I really enjoyed this one too. He talks about, this is Palpatine. He says, this surge, the culmination of Vader's relentless nature and his inability to free himself from the past, was simply too powerful to fully hide from the dark side. Just as he couldn't contain his own impulses when facing Kenobi on Mustafar, he now exposed a secret he held most dear. Still the fool, right? Calling him a fool for chasing these feelings and thinking that this was ever going to happen, because in Palpatine's mind, he is just a slave of Vader's a slave for him, right? Vader, that's his. It's not even his, like, yeah, I was going to say his right hand person, or the Emperor's. I'm trying to think of what's her name? Mara Jade reference there. The Emperor's hand, right? The Emperor's hand. It's not even that. I mean, he just sees him as a tool, as a means to an end to get all this, to get everything done. But then he looks at Palpatine. He starts, and then everything kind of shifts, right? He then starts looking at Luke as kind of like this blank slate, right? You've got a very powerful Force user, tons of potential, and rather than allowing Vader to do this, he wants Vader to go ahead and find him, but he wants Vader to find him so that he can take him, he can manipulate him, and that can be them in that vision. I mean, that doesn't cover this in the story. This is my own kind of interpretation, but he's almost thinking like, why should that be Anakin there? That should be me, and that should be Luke, and we should have this fleet, right? This delusions of grandeur almost. And so it's at that moment that he realizes, okay, I'm going to do whatever Vader asks at this point to find Luke. I'm going to allow him the full resources of the Empire, no stone unturned. I'm not going to question anything. Whatever he needs, I'm going to empower him so that whatever he needs to do to find Luke Skywalker, he can do so, because that's an opportunity. Ever the opportunist, Palpatine is kind of looking at it from that angle. Of course, then it bleeds into the very end of the story, kind of trails off into what we see in Empire Strikes Back with the, what is thy bidding, my master? They have the whole conversation about, bringing Luke Skywalker over to the dark side. And it ends with a very cool couple lines here. It says, despite the armor and machinery, Vader's heart still beat with the fire of Anakin Skywalker, a fire that Palpatine would put to the test. And then that's when he says there's been a great disturbance in the Force. So, very, very interesting, at least. I mean, the way it ends and kind of how all of this plays out, the context, the background into that disturbance of the Force, and really just, again, understanding that from this moment, even I would say this, even in that moment, until we get to Return of the Jedi, I don't think I have ever had interpreted that Palpatine was really truly after Luke Skywalker to usurp Vader in some way. I think we know that now through a number of other things in comics and stories, and certainly this story. But even up until that point, I never really got the idea that he wanted Luke Skywalker to really join him until he almost literally says those words in Return of the Jedi. But I guess your thoughts, on the final piece here and kind of how the story wrapped up and ended. Anything else that you want to add in there?
Well, I love that quote, Vader's heart still beat with the fire of Anakin Skywalker. I wrote down the same quote because I was like, man, that's just like nail right on the head. Like,
right.
It's kind of the same thing that we see in that vision of those two sides coming together and kind of blending in a weird way. And it's very fitting that Palpatine would use Anakin's obsession, or Vader's obsession, to help him accomplish something for his own ends. I mean, that's exactly how he ended up in the position that he was in. So, it's very fitting that this plan would eventually come together.
Yep. There's a question in there where he says how much. The other thing that we didn't talk about was at the very end, Palpatine is kind of asking himself two questions, and that's how much did Vader know right up until this moment, and how far had he gone to hide his betrayal? And he never addresses that technically in the story, but I think he's got questions about just how far Vader has gone at this point. I think in his mind, he knows that Vader's probably on the trail, but he has no context around, have they made contact? Have they seen each other? We know they have from the comics. They'd already met. And I don't remember from the comics at this point. Jonesy's in the chat. Maybe he remembers, but I can't remember if he actually ever told the Emperor that he had found Vader, because I think the way I remember the story, and I may be romanticizing this in some way, I think he was meeting or running into Skywalker on the trail of Skywalker, but didn't really give Palpatine all those details because, again, he was trying to keep this very secret, trying to keep it very hush-hush. I think that would pretty much align with this, but again, I don't remember. But yeah, all of this was really just kind of, like I said, it was a test to see where Vader would go next. And, on that trail to Luke Skywalker and bring him over to the dark side.
I also expect that if Vader had found Luke, there wouldn't have been like before this point, there wouldn't have been a question in the Emperor's mind, because it's like he was saying, or as he was observing throughout the story, which is that Anakin cannot control his emotions. So I think if he actually succeeded in finding Luke sooner, it almost seems like it would have been obvious. Like there would have been some sort of a reaction from Vader, and he would have known. Kind of like if you think about like there's like a parallel to in the Kenobi show when the Emperor tells Vader like you're obviously still obsessed with Kenobi, like you need to move on from this. Like it almost, you kind of get the same impression from the way that the Emperor can sense Vader's emotions in this story. So I don't know. I almost feel like if he had found Luke sooner, it might have been more obvious to the Emperor. That's just kind of my theory.
Yeah. Like I said, I know they met in between the movies. They actually had a lightsaber confrontation in one of the very first arc in that Star Wars comic that came out. But I don't remember him ever calling him out as his son at that point. It does happen a little bit later, but even earlier on in their meetings, it was just kind of like, oh, you're the guy that blew up the Death Star. I'm going to kill you now, kind of thing. I'm obsessed about that point. It turns into something much more personal, of course, when he does realize and put two and two together that this is his son. And to go back to also, like for the longest time, when there was always a debate about if Vader ever found out or heard that there was a person named Skywalker that blew up the Death Star, that why wouldn't he just be like, whoa, that's my name? Why, that's got to be a relation. And I want to say, and I don't know if this is a tall tale, wise tale, whatever you want to call it, but I remember there was a time when the prevailing rumor or whatever was that Lucas had come out and said that Skywalker was just like Johnson, right? There's a lot of people named Johnson in the world, and so there are a lot of people in the galaxy. It's a very big galaxy, and just because this person blew up the Death Star as Skywalker doesn't necessarily mean that it would be a red flag for Vader. I would argue, though, now with this story, knowing that there was a disturbance in the Force and the person's last name was Skywalker, I mean, I would think that was enough for at least to get started or put that in the back of his mind, right? That maybe there is something here in some way more than just, Joe Skywalker out there running around the galaxy.
And there's no coincidences with all them. So like there's no way that it could be just coincidentally someone named Skywalker when it comes to Palpatine, Anakin, and all of them. I don't know. I feel like the way that things play out in their stories, it's just like so just the perfect amount of things have to all come together for things to go this way. So I don't think that if they knew that it was someone named Skywalker, or if Anakin knew it was someone named Skywalker, it seems hard for me to believe that he would be like, oh, just a coincidence.
Right. Nothing to see. We'll go on about our day. So, let's see. Jeff says the whole seriousness of it all and Palpatine questioning how long it has been going on makes it all funnier that Afra was the one doing all the legwork. And Chris says, well, he is a slow learner. So that could be some of it as well. So yeah, if you get a chance, this is definitely one of the highlights of the book. There's, again, 40 stories in the book in total, and there's some really good ones in there. And again, there's some other ones that are just kind of like, meh, they're okay. It was funny too, in that Spotify interview, Mike Chen had talked about he wanted to tell the story of the cave. And I forget the writer who did that one. I think it was Tracy something I forget her last name. Tracy something ended up writing that story about the cave itself. And she almost gave she gave the cave like a personality. Like it was almost sentient in a way, and it was thinking and talking. And this is kind of the weirdness of these stories. Some of them are kind of like, wow, really far out there. But I thought that story was really good too. And Mike Chen did give her credit and said this is he had a different take to kind of bring it back to this. His take was he was actually going to pitch the cave as, Yoda seeing visions of Anakin and Padme almost in a positive light, like a very different kind, like almost he called it the yin and yang, right? This was the actual opposite tale that he was trying to do with the cave when he originally pitched it. But I think, that is a very interesting take. Like, I love the fact that he's thinking about these stories like from a visions kind of perspective, right? Being really in tune with the Force, being in tune with the characters, stuff that we got from the prequel trilogy, And of course, we should mention, I mean, he ended up doing Brotherhood as well, which is a great book. We really, we did talk about that one a lot. There is no cave. No, I don't think that's the one. I don't think that's a story. I think it's got a different name, if I'm not mistaken. Tracy something is the writer on that one. I think the one that you're talking about, Jonesy, is the one with the worm, the big space slug. That's not that one. It's a different one. But either way, interesting take there on doing that story. So, but yeah, get a chance. I think Music Train, I may have put his comments in here, had talked about he went out and downloaded the audiobook just to kind of listen to it. So, oh, nice. I didn't realize it was read by Sam Witwer. So, I mean, if that's not enough to sell
awesome.
you, on the audiobook, I mean, come on.
Right.
I can't imagine what that, I got to go listen to that now because I love when he gets a chance to do all those.
Yeah, he's great.
Okay. Let's see. Jeff says, if you ever want to talk about the man who built Cloud City, just hit me up. Okay. There's another recommendation from Jeff on which story to maybe read next. All right. So you and I talked about this. We are probably going to come back next week and do another show, probably Wednesday night. I think it works. And this time we're going to do something from Tales of Sith and Jedi. Is that the name of the book?
Jedi and Sith. Yeah.
Stories of Jedi and Sith is the name of the book. So let me get that book.
Something about Jedi, something about Sith.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. Something like that. So this guy right here. So we're going to we'll do something from that one as well. Just kind of continue. I was thinking about it. It's almost like summer reading for, high school. Like here, we're doing like stories or episodes on the summer reading. Tracy Dion, thank you. Circle gets a square. Thank you, Jonesy, for coming in at the very end. Tracy has wrote that one. But yeah, we're going to do another one of these quick kind of short story episodes on Wednesday of next week. Jonesy's back, and kind of a programming note, we'll be coming back on Sunday night. So Sunday night, we're going to do a Patreon spotlight. I think we're going to talk about the Ahsoka trailer and some of the more recent Ahsoka news. It's kind of an update, so we're going to aggregate everything that's kind of happened here over the last week or two, especially this week. There's been a lot of stuff from the Empire article. There's some new footage that just came out. They did a 30-second spot. There's some new footage. We're going to break that footage down. Some pretty interesting things in there. We've got actors now saying more about their characters, which is starting to pique the interest of a lot of people and cause theories to start spinning up.
I saw some stuff that sounded borderline spoilery. I was like, oh my
that's what I'm saying.
I can't believe they said
yeah.
that.
Yeah. So like it's all starting to pour out. And I think we got officially the release date, which I think was August 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes.
So that was a week earlier. Yeah, it was. Remember I told you, I said we were going to find out this week because this is about the time. 6 weeks is about the time when they let us know. Because they got to start the whole marketing train, right? That's got to get time to ramp up and get on the rails and however far you want to follow that analogy. But yeah, so August 23rd is the official release date. And that's actually 7 days earlier than the date that was leaked a couple weeks ago. So good that they did bring that down because it was probably incorrect. But yeah, so we've got a lot to discuss here around Ahsoka. So that'll be Sunday night. And we'll do the Way Station, all the news for the last week or two. We'll kind of condense that down and then follow up with that Patreon show where we're going to spotlight all of the more recent Ahsoka footage and break all that down. So, and then from that point on, it'll be kind of business as usual. And Lauren and I, and maybe even Lauren and Jonesy, I'm trying to get them to maybe do some of these stories. We'll see. I don't know. We got to pitch it to Jonesy, see what he wants to do. But I think we got
to convince Jonesy to get into short stories, perhaps.
Yep.
Although he did know the Tracy one, so.
Yeah. Well, that's what Wikipedia is for. Hey, I'm just kidding. What do you got coming up down the pipe? What are you working on here right now? What are you reading right now?
Well, I am doing, so I've been doing a getting ready for Ahsoka series of videos where I'm anything that's relevant to either the characters or the circumstances of that time period of the Ahsoka show. I'm revisiting some books that kind of tie in. So I just finished a reread of Bloodline, and I am going to be doing a video covering Bloodline for anybody that read it years ago and wants a refresher, or anybody who's thinking about reading it before the show comes out.
Then how would you say that feeds into Ahsoka? Did you find there was some stuff of relevance there?
Yeah. So the reason that I was like, I need to revisit this is because after everything with Mando and how the New Republic and like how ineffective the New Republic was during this time period was something that really played a big part in Mando, it made me be like, okay, I wouldn't be surprised if this comes up again in Ahsoka, since it's, a similar time frame. So that's what made me be like, I should revisit this.
No, so we saw it in Mando, we saw it in Andor. I mean, pretty much it's been consistent throughout, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was like, and Bloodline does a great job of explaining how exactly that came to be, and like what's the situation in terms of like why it got so bad and how they got overthrown. So that's why I felt like that book was just a good one to kind of dive into again.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're looking forward to that. All right. Well, I think we are going to end the show tonight there. Thanks everybody joining in the live chat. If you guys want to join us on all of these, you can head out to cantinacast.com/YouTube. Subscribe, like, comment, please, all that stuff, so we can get into the algorithms and get moved up. We would certainly appreciate that. Thanks everybody that joined us on the live show tonight, including Jonathan, Music Train, Sky, Cube Dube, Dale, Jeff, Chris, Riley, Echo Base Network, and I think that was everyone. If I missed anyone, my apologies. Thanks for everybody that chimed in or kind of was hanging out in the background. We had more than that, a lot more than that. So thanks for showing up and being stalkerish. We really appreciate that as well. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Any final words, any last things before we get out of here?
Nope, sounds good to me.
See, I do that so it buys me time to get to the thing that I can press.
Oh, I'm sorry. You want me to give a speech?
No.
I'll give a big
we flame
speech.
out on these shows every time, so this is no different. We've set that standard, the precedent, so this is just par for course. But no, thanks everybody. We'll see you guys on Sunday for the Way Station and our continuing coverage of Ahsoka.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.